Right now, somewhere, a woman is talking to her belly. Her partner is watching, maybe smiling, maybe feeling a little ridiculous about it. But what if the person they're talking to is actually listening? Not metaphorically, not in some feel-good spiritual sense. Listening, encoding, processing, and remembering. For the past 4 decades, researchers across 3 continents have been trying to answer a single question. What does a baby know on the day it's born? And what they've found doesn't just challenge our assumptions about newborns. It forces us to rethink when human experience actually begins. Most people assume that a newborn arrives as a blank slate. No memories, no preferences, just raw reflexes and hunger. And if you think about it, that sounds reasonable. The womb is dark, muffled, and the brain is barely formed. What could there possibly be to learn in there? But here's the problem with that theory. In 1980, 2 researchers at the University of North Carolina designed an experiment with babies who were barely 2 days old. 2 days. These infants hadn't spent more than 48 hours in the outside world. And yet, when given the choice between hearing their mother's voice and a stranger's voice, they didn't just show a preference. They changed their own behavior to make the right voice play. They altered their sucking pattern on a modified pacifier at 48 hours old. That's not a blank slate. That's someone who came prepared. That experiment, published in the journal Science by Anthony DeCasper and William Pfeiffer, became one of the most cited studies in developmental psychology. The methodology was elegant. Newborns were given a non-nutritive pacifier connected to a tape recorder. One sucking rhythm played the mother's voice. A different rhythm played a female stranger's voice. Within minutes, the infants reliably adjusted their sucking to trigger their own mother's voice. Think about what that means. A 2-day-old baby had already learned something. They had heard a voice through tissue and fluid for weeks, encoded it into memory, and on the first day of their new life, they reached for it, the only way they could. But it goes deeper than that. 6 years later, DeCasper and Melanie Spence at the same university ran a follow-up. They asked pregnant women to read aloud the same story, The Cat in the Hat, twice a day for the final 6 weeks of pregnancy. After birth, using the same pacifier technique, the babies were given a choice: the story they'd heard in the womb or a completely new story. They chose the familiar one. Not the mother's voice reading something new, the specific story they had heard before they were born. These babies didn't just recognize a voice, they recognized a narrative. They had favorite stories before they ever opened their eyes. And here's what nobody expected. In 2003, a team led by Barbara Kiselewski at Queen's University in Canada partnered with researchers at Zhejiang University in China and went one step further. They measured fetal heart rate responses in real time. At 33 weeks gestational age, still 7 weeks before birth, fetuses hearing their mother's voice showed cardiac acceleration, an increase in heart rate, a sign of recognition, comfort, engagement. But when the voice of a stranger played through a speaker placed on the mother's abdomen, the fetal heart rate decelerated. That deceleration is what researchers call an orienting response, the physiological signature of hearing something unfamiliar, something new, something that is not your mother. A fetus, still floating in amniotic fluid, with lungs that have never drawn air, was already sorting the world into known and unknown. Already deciding who belongs and who doesn't. Now think about your own life for a moment. Think about every conversation you had in the last weeks of a pregnancy. Every phone call, every song you hummed while cooking dinner, every argument you had in the next room, thinking no one could hear. Someone was listening. Not just hearing, listening. processing the rhythm of your words, the rise and fall of your voice, the cadence that makes you, you. And when that baby was born and placed on your chest, and you spoke for the first time in the same room, they didn't hear a stranger. They heard the voice that had been the soundtrack to their entire existence. The one constant in a world that had just become blindingly bright, shockingly cold, and overwhelmingly loud. You were the one sound that meant safety, and they knew it before they ever saw your face. Now I need to tell you about a discovery that moved the field from interesting to astonishing. In 2013, a team at the University of Helsinki, led by Eino Partinen, published a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world. They wanted to test something that sounded almost impossible. Can a fetus form a specific auditory memory that survives birth? Here's what they did. They recruited pregnant women in their third trimester and had them play a specific melody, a simple repeating sequence of notes, multiple times a week until delivery. A control group heard nothing unusual. After the babies were born, the researchers placed EEG caps on the newborns, tiny electrodes measuring electrical activity across the brain in real time. Then they played two melodies, the one from the womb and a new one the baby had never heard. The babies who had been exposed in utero showed a measurably stronger neural response to the familiar melody. Their brains lit up differently, not to music in general, not to sound in general, to that specific sequence of notes, the melody they had learned in the dark. And here's the detail that haunted the researchers. The strength of the neural response correlated with how much the mothers had played the melody during pregnancy. More exposure meant stronger memory. The baby's brain had been recording, faithfully, session by session, building a neural trace of a song it couldn't name, in a world it couldn't see. When asked to describe the finding, the researchers used a phrase that captures it perfectly. They called it prenatal auditory learning. Not exposure, not passive hearing, learning. The baby was a student before it was born, and the womb was the first classroom. But there's a dimension to this that most people don't consider, and it's the one that matters most. If the fetal brain can learn a melody, if it can encode a voice, if it can distinguish familiar from unfamiliar, then it can also encode something else: the emotional texture of its environment. In 2015, researchers at Brigham Young University, led by Ashley Webb, published findings showing that prenatal exposure to stressed, argumentative, or conflict-heavy vocal environments measurably altered newborn cortisol patterns. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Babies born into homes where there had been frequent, loud conflict during the third trimester showed elevated baseline cortisol and heightened cortisol reactivity in the first months of life. That means the baby didn't just hear the arguing. The baby's stress response system was shaped by it. Their nervous system came pre-calibrated to the emotional weather of the home, before they took a single breath. This isn't about guilt. It isn't about being perfect. Every couple argues. Every household has tense days. But the science reveals something humbling. The environment you create around a pregnant woman is not just her environment. It is the baby's first experience of what the world feels like. And that experience writes itself into biology. Now, if you're hearing this and worrying about every raised voice during a pregnancy, take a breath. The research is clear on this too. Occasional stress is normal, and the fetal brain is remarkably resilient. What the studies describe is chronic, sustained conflict, not a bad Tuesday. The human brain, even a prenatal one, is built with extraordinary plasticity. It adapts, it recovers, it rewires. And if you're a parent who went through a difficult pregnancy, stress, conflict, hardship, your awareness of that fact is already an act of love. Because awareness is what leads to connection, and connection is what the developing brain needs more than perfection. Trust that instinct. The research says you should. So the next time you see someone talking to a pregnant belly, or the next time you hear a newborn go quiet the instant their mother speaks, remember what's actually happening. That baby has been listening for months. They have memorized the rhythm of a voice they've never seen a face for. They have encoded melodies, stories, the emotional temperature of a home. They arrive into the world not blank, but full of data they gathered in the dark, full of preferences they formed before they had words for wanting. 300,000 years of human evolution built an ear that can function before a lung can. It built a brain that starts recording before it starts seeing. It built a bonding system so powerful that a 2-day-old infant will physically work, change their sucking rhythm, alter their own behavior, just to hear one specific voice out of 7 billion. The womb was never a waiting room. It was the first conversation. And by the time your baby is born, they already know your voice better than you know theirs. If this changed how you think about what babies know before birth, subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments. Did you talk to your baby before they were born? And if so, do you think they remember? And if you've ever wondered why newborns stare at faces with that unblinking intensity, like they're searching for something specific, that's the next video. And the answer involves a part of the brain that shouldn't be active yet, but is.